Welcome back. Today, I want to analyze the last 3 rapid games that I played on Lead Chess. If you're new to my channel, I'm not a titled player or a chess coach. I'm just a random middle-aged person trying to get better at chess. And one way that I do that is analyze games that I've played and try to find out, the reasons for the mistakes that I made, things that I could have done better, and so on. However, I'm going to have to change the settings on Lead Chess because I don't know if any of you have noticed, but I've noticed while editing my last few videos that the more Stockfish runs, the more that my video and microphone sync gets messed up. Because I have this recording software running here and it's trying to take the images from the webcam and the audio from the microphone and sync them up. And I think sometimes my CPU gets clogged up while running Stockfish and the video part gets messed up. The audio seems to keep going in a, at a fairly normal pace, but I've noticed several places, and it's usually while Stockfish is running hard that the video gets messed up. But anyway, so what I've done here is I've made sure I'm using the weakest version of Stockfish 16. There's 3 different versions for some reason. And I've taken the lines from 3 down to 2. And I've changed the memory usage from 64 megabytes down to 32 megabytes. I don't know if that'll make any difference, but anyway, I've changed these settings. Hopefully that will make a difference. This is my Lead Chess Rapid game from a couple of nights ago, and I'm playing with the black pieces. I think from this position we can conclude one of 2 things. Either my opponent didn't know how to checkmate with the piece that they had, or they were just having fun. There's literally no reason to get multiple queens if your opponent doesn't have any pieces, and this, it's easy to checkmate with just a king and a rook if the opponent doesn't have any other pieces. But this opponent decided to go ahead and get multiple queens, and I decided not to resign. That was one of my goals for this year whenever possible, so I just kept playing to see if they could do it. Once they started getting multiple queens, that of course tells me they might not know how to checkmate with the ones that they have. And if so, there's no reason for me to resign at that point. And of course, the more queens you have, the easier it is to stalemate, so. And the reason that I mentioned that and went on about it for a second is that if you're ever playing a game and you think your opponent should resign, try to see it from their perspective. And in this case, my perspective is my opponent should be able to beat me because I knew they were ahead. But then they started acting as if they didn't know how to checkmate me. So that gave me confidence. So if you ever feel just like playing with your opponent, or you get upset that they don't resign and you decide I'm just going to promote all my pawns to knights and bishops or 8 queens or whatever, think about what the other person is thinking. And I'm almost always thinking, it's possible they don't know how to checkmate me. But there is one place that I went behind, and it's right here. Oh, apparently it is on the next move. My opponent made a mistake here and took us to even. And according to the move list, I played b5, and that was a blunder, and I never recovered from that. I apparently followed it with 2 mistakes, and I do know that it says in the move list what I should have played, but I haven't seen it, so I'm trying to guess. I do know that this pawn was an irritant right here. It's keeping me, from moving certain pieces. I guess maybe I could have put a rook on an open file. I could have put a rook behind this pawn, but they can close off either one of those files whenever they want to, right? They can just put I noticed that that they can do that, and then I would have to throw away a rook for the knight, and then they would have a pawn in there, and I don't want that. So maybe it wasn't moving a rook to an open file. Maybe it was challenging the knight. No, because if they take, then I've messed up my pawn structure, and then they have a rook protecting this pawn. Maybe it was getting this knight out of the way so that my rook would be pointed at that pawn. Maybe knight to c5, because I can't put it on, over there. Well, I can, but surely it wasn't moving pawns trying to challenge that row that they've got. I didn't know that was a mistake. I knew we were even on material here, but because they have a pawn so far advanced and they have all these pawns keeping mine from moving forward, my rooks aren't really doing anything. I wasn't sure we were even here. That's the only thing I can think of is to attack this pawn, but then they can just move the knight. They'll be attacking this pawn, so I wouldn't be able to take their forward d pawn. I don't know. Okay, according to the engine, it does say knight to c5, which, like I said, would attack this pawn, but then they would play what I said, which is knight to e3, but then I would play knight to d3, which is there, right next to their king. Okay. It's not really attacking anything, but it's preventing their... Okay, so that's how I could have got the pawn. And it says they would have played rook h to f1, and then I would have taken the pawn. No, then I would have played b5 because their knight's attacking this pawn. And they would have played b3 to attack that pawn, and then I would have taken this one. Wow, that's a pretty complicated series of events, but I see that now. I did have 7.5 minutes left. Maybe I could have found that if I had thought. How long did I spend on what I did play, which was b5? It didn't play b5. It played what I should have played. All right, what I played was b5. Okay, I only spent 5 seconds on that. All right, I think part of the problem is that I didn't know this was a crucial point in the game where I only have a couple of choices. It says I could have stayed pretty close with f5, but I'm not sure about that. And it says they would have taken, but I don't know. I think they would have pushed past so that when I took and they took, they would have an outside pawn. But it would still be opposed. I don't know. But my point was, I don't know at certain points during the game that this is the point that I'm about to go behind, so I should spend more time on this move. And so when I look at the clock and say, oh, I should have spent more time on this move, you never know which one is the one. This is the one you have to spend time on, which of course is a reason to play longer time controls. But these games I play, one of the last things I do before turning in for the night, so I'm not going to play a really long game at that point. Okay, I think I understand that. It is, like I said, a pretty long road to getting this pawn if the opponent plays right, which they probably will, because then I'll have to protect that pawn, maybe not immediately. Actually, now that I think about it, I'm kind of surprised that when they play here, I won't protect that pawn immediately. It says I would hop in here, but then they could just take that pawn, and then my knight's not protected. Oh, but then I can fork their rooks. Okay, got it. I think I understand that. All right, but after I played this, my opponent could attack that pawn immediately by playing knight to c7. There's nothing I can do about it. And it says I would then play knight to c5, which is what I should have played last turn, and then they're going to take that pawn. So I basically just wasted that pawn because they can take it. They can, but that's not their best move. That's very close, but their best move is to bring this rook over here to this open file. And my opponent found it, which isn't a big surprise. I think I would have found that too. I mean, right? All these squares here are protected by their pawns. That rook's not doing anything. Might as well bring it over. So, that seems fairly obvious they did that. And I became increasingly convinced that I was doing poorly. Now, again, now I'm supposed to just offer the rook trade. And they won't take it. It says they'll come right up here and see if I want to take, because they're pawn. But that's my best move. My second best move is to bring my king up. But I decided that the knight was pretty irritating being right in here, and so I decided to offer a trade for it, but that was a mistake because they can just take it, and when I take back, what's going to stop that pawn? Their absolute best move, according to Stockfish, is to bring the king forward, but their second best move is to plant the rook here on e7, which they did. Well, now I can't move this rook because then that pawn's hanging. So it says to move this pawn, but then that means the g pawn is hanging. It doesn't say they would take it. If I play f5, says they would play g5. Okay, well that's what I said earlier. Earlier when it said I should play g5, it said they would take, but now it says they would push past. I think that they would. My second best move is b4. I don't know how bad this was, but I played g6 because I wanted to move the f pawn. I mean, I wanted to move the rook, but I had to move the f pawn first, but the g pawn was hanging, so that's why I played g6. But that's not great. My opponent found king to c3 this time, and again, it's not a huge surprise. I guess they figured, this is safe, the other rook is safe. Their king can come chop off these pawns. And they did, and they came for that. I'm supposed to play g5 now, but I did this because I had said that I wanted to maybe move the rook over, and I wanted those pawns to be out of the path of the rook. But it is their best move to just keep coming after my free pawns here. I'm not sure why, but I brought my king over here thinking maybe there would be some sort of... Actually, you know what I think it was? I thought that if we ended up trading rooks, I could get my king in front of that pawn. Maybe that's what it was. But they took my b pawn. I did put a rook up there. That's what I was thinking about. Yeah, okay. And it's their best move to come toward it with the king. Really? All right, my computer's fan has kicked on even with the lowered settings there on Stockfish, so it is an aging machine and not really up to the task. But anyway, they took that pawn, which wasn't their best move, but it works because what can I do? That was inaccurate. I think it's fairly obvious what I'm attempting here. They're again supposed to bring their king. I'm not sure why they didn't find this, because they found this, right? They found king to c3 and chopping off all these pawns. I'm not sure why they didn't think of moving their king there. And it says if they had, I would have just taken this rook and they would have taken there and I would have got my rook way over here instead of going in front of it. Oh, and my king would have been cut off at that point because of their rook at the back. All right, well, they took me, which was a mistake, and I'm supposed to take back with my king. But I took back with the rook. Now they're supposed to come up to d4, I guess, to force that pawn to get rid of itself. Or a4. They decided to go after that pawn with the king, which isn't horrible. Okay. I'm not sure about most of that except for here. I think I understand this idea, but it's several moves out there, as we determined. And as one of you, I think Anderson Connors, said in a comment recently on one of my videos, if I could see 4 and 5 moves in the, ahead, then I wouldn't be rated what I am. I wouldn't be rated 1263 rapid on chess.com. I'd be rated 1500 or 1800. At least that's what it seems to me. So I don't know how I'm expected to be able to see 4 and 5 moves ahead, because that's what we determined. It would take me, whatever it was, 4 or 5 moves before I would get this pawn. And that's the whole idea of this move, as far as I can tell. I'm working on it. That's one reason I do puzzles when I do puzzles. And that's one reason I analyze these games. But my feeling is right now it's going to be a while before I can see that far ahead and figure out the best move here. Well, I don't feel too bad about that. At least it wasn't just hanging a piece or something. In the following night's game, which was night before last, we were about even here. I have apparently a very slight advantage, and I blundered here. I think what it says over here is I played a6. I don't want to look because I'm afraid I'll see what I should have played. The reason that I played a6 is because I was worried about, a check coming over here. Should I have just taken the knight? Probably. I'm going to guess I should have just taken the knight. Oh, well, it's one of 2 moves. Okay, I could have taken the knight, or I could have just gotten this knight out to c6. Either one of those. Now, interestingly, it says if I took the knight, I should expect them to play bishop to b5 check, and I would block it with this knight, and then they would take that bishop with their queen. I don't think that's what would happen, but I'm pretty sure if I took here, they would take with their bishop, but I guess I can see why that would be a good idea. But I didn't. I played this pawn forward to prevent the check, and you see the line there. If your screen's big enough, you can see that the line is queen to a4 check, which I have to get out of check, and then they take my bishop for free. And that's why I should have taken there or put this knight here first. So good job for my opponent for seeing that. I wonder how long did they spend on queen to a4 check? 3 seconds. Okay, well good. They've probably seen this before. If I'm not mistaken, this is a common mistake in the Caro-Kann among people at my level or lower, is leaving that there where the queen can immediately attack it while also checking. The interesting thing about this opponent is that for winning this game, they got 389 points. Because it was their first ever game on Lichess, according to their profile. I checked their profile right after this because I was curious. I got paired against one of those people that it says 1500 question mark, which on Lichess means they've never played a game at this time control before, because they use the Glico 2 rating system, which starts everyone at 1500, and you go up or down based on that. And according to their profile, they just played one more game right after this, and that was it. That's all the games they've ever played on this account on Lichess. For all I know, they have another account, but so good job for them. First time they ever played a game of chess, and they beat me with this tactic here. All right, I understand that. I have to learn to watch out for that. If this diagonal's open, if they can check me over here. I got it. And last night's game was one of those that I always worry a little bit about at the end when I run the review, and it said I have 0 mistakes, 0 blunders, 0 inaccuracies. It says I played with 97% accuracy and an average center-pawn loss of 16, which is outstanding. That doesn't mean that you're really good at chess necessarily, because in this case, I think it just means that I noticed when my opponent made a mistake and I took advantage of it. But this game felt weird to me in several places. If you've ever played one of the low-rated bots on chess.com, you'll notice that like sometimes on move 2 or 3 or 5, they'll make an obvious mistake, like just moving their king to the side when they don't need to, or they'll get their knight out and put it back, that kind of thing. Or they won't notice when, they have a piece hanging. This game felt like that in a few places, but this opponent was rated higher than me when we played, and they're rated significantly higher than me in Blitz. So I'm not sure what happened here. As you can see, they made a blunder on move 8. So let's just go to that point. I played the English as I have been recently. I believe this is the Carl's-Bremen system. I just went ahead and prepared to, get this knight out here to protect the other one, but they went ahead and took it, which I think is relatively normal. The eval bar says we're about even. I got my bishop here. This is all relatively normal. This move prepares, I don't think it's their best move in the position, but it prepares d5, which I'll just take because this pawn's doubled anyway, right? So I got ready to have a pawn in the center after we doubled there on undoubled on d5, but they didn't play d5. They just moved their queen over. And I don't know if that was a misclick, I'm not sure what the idea of that was. The only thing that I could think of, if they were tapping on that square, they might have been thinking about bringing the knight back to advance the f-pawn, because in some positions that's common. But here, after they had played c6 on their previous turn, I fully expected d5. So when they played that, I was taken aback, but I fairly quickly, we'll see the clock in a second to know exactly how long, but I fairly quickly recognized that rook can't move and I can attack it immediately. And I tried to see, can they block that? They gave away their dark squared bishop, so they can't block it with that. Neither one of their knights can get to these squares. They could put the pawn there, but I could just take that pawn. And I'm going to get the rook for the bishop. I don't know if that was my best move here. Okay, it was. And the clock says I played that in 5 seconds. Okay, so good for me. I found the best move in 5 seconds because that move felt so odd to me. I immediately started to wonder, what's the downside of that? And the downside is that their rook is trapped. I don't know what their best move here would have been, but they did play d5. Now, I went ahead and took the rook, and after they took back with the king, which I don't think was their best, then I took on d5. And as you can see, nobody else made any mistakes or blunders until my opponent made an inaccuracy on move 19. So let's just go to there. They took back, which I expected them to do. I developed the knight, I castled. Then, you know, we're just playing chess here. They're coming after that, but it's defended, so I wasn't too worried about it. I protected it anyway in case I need to move my queen. I was thinking about moving my queen here in a second if they ever took back there, you know, but right now their queen's back there, but they might move it at some point. So that's why I put an extra defender here. Well, my opponent went ahead and took the knight, which I'm sure wasn't their best move because I can take back with the piece I just did. Now, I think maybe if I hadn't have protected that, they would have taken, so I'd have to take with the queen, and then they could have gotten this pawn. And maybe that's what they were thinking. Maybe they thought I was going to take there with the queen and they would get this pawn. I'm not sure. So they got the other knight out, which seems like a good idea. And we're staying at around +4 here. I kicked the knight out and doubled up rooks facing their queen. Not sure what that does because I was clearly aiming to push this pawn and they were already defending that, but they got out. Maybe they were thinking of attacking my queen over on a3. I'm not sure. So I pushed e4 and they moved their queen over and I took, which opens up this huge, you know, that's pretty nice for me. I've got both my rooks. This almost never happens to me. And I don't know what my opponent should have played here, but they just put their queen up. I guess thinking of bringing their rook over. I can't go down there just yet. And I don't know what the engine says my best move is here, but I played f4 because this pawn is well, it's in the way of my bishop for one thing. So I played that so I can defend here. And we stayed around +5 or +6 for several more moves until my opponent made their next blunder. So went after that pawn, I just went ahead and took, figuring they would take back, but they didn't. They lined up here. I'm going to guess because the eval dropped a little bit on this next move that I probably should have just taken the rook, but I'm curious. Yeah, I should have just taken the rook, and after they took back, oh, then I would have taken over here. If they took, yeah, because they would have to take back with the knight. And they wouldn't be defending this anymore. Okay, well that's pretty smart. I didn't see that. I brought this over here to pin the knight. I thought I was pinning the knight. I mean, I'm attacking it, but I'm also threatening to do something over here. And if they move to attack me, something like that, I can check. This is actually what I was thinking, that, you know, they're going to move this to protect it. And I thought they might move it here. I would come over and check, or maybe come up and check, and the king would have to step back, and then I would have something serious down there. But they took my rook, which is probably fine. I took back. They did put their knight over there, which allows me to check, and it looks like that was my best move, or among my best moves. So they have to step back, because they could have blocked with their queen, but I just would have taken it, right? And they can't come out here because of my rook. So because I'm up 4 points of material, I thought I could trade off queens at this point. I have no idea what my best move was, but I'm going to look. What I played was queen to e7, thinking they would take, and I would take. Then I would be aiming at that pawn, and I would have a passed pawn, because I've got a passed pawn. I have 2 passed pawns, as a matter of fact. And I thought between the rook and the bishop, which is protecting that one, I'd be okay. So I went in there, and I don't know, should they have? Yeah, they should have taken it. By far their best move, but they played h6. And that's where I was talking about, not only the thing earlier where they trapped their rook, but this here where I'm obviously threatening your queen. Why would you play h6? Is it even my best move? It's not my best move to take their queen? Oh, it is. Okay. Because it says 9.7 after I took their queen. But before I take it, it's mate in 10, mate in 9. I think maybe when the game review ran, it didn't fully develop this next move here where I took. It said +9. But as we know, it's a mate in something. But yeah, that just felt really strange to me, and they resigned here, having spent less than 2 minutes on 26 moves. I bring up their time usage because, like I said, they're rated much higher than me in Blitz, so they must just be accustomed to moving quickly. So I feel pretty good about this one. I'm always a little nervous when the game review ends up with zeros there on the mistakes, because I assume my opponent sees that too, and they're going to be like, my opponent didn't make any mistakes, and they're talking about me. But in this case, those 2 blunders seemed fairly obvious to me, giving up the rook for the bishop and giving up the queen here. So I wasn't able to learn much from this game. But I think I got something out of the previous two, although it's a little tough. I must be at that point in my chess development where, even though I still do occasionally make elementary level blunders or even intermediate blunders, like the last one where I left the bishop there and they checked on a4 and could come across and take the bishop, I count that as an intermediate blunder because it's not hanging the piece immediately. It's requiring my opponent to see a simple tactic to take the piece. But the previous game that's an advanced blunder, because it's just like it's a 4 or 5 move sequence for me to get that d6 pawn in that first game. And so that's the point that I'm at in my chess development, whereas I rarely, but sometimes make elementary level blunders. Most of my blunders and mistakes are intermediate, which means the opponent has to see a tactic. Sometimes they see it, sometimes they don't. And a bunch of my blunders, an increasing number of my blunders, are advanced, which means that it's a long-term thing. There's a tactic there, but it's a ways off. It requires seeing multiple moves in the future to know why that move is bad. And that's a tough place to be, because if I'm going to keep getting better, if I want to improve my rating, I'm going to have to figure more of those out. And that's tough on my old brain, but I'm going to keep trying. Hopefully you will too. Thank you for spending your time here, and I will see you next time.